Nitish with the Purple Corner, and we have here with us Mridula Garg, an acclaimed writer across English and Hindi. Uh, I'll start right away. So, yesterday you had a great session on censorship in literature, and you also talked about it in the past. So, I'm interested in your opinion about how you see the current state of literature and how the way sort of goes forward from here.
You see, the problem is that when I was censored, it was ostensibly for obscenity. But the main thing is, censorship is there so that you may not think. It is not, a writer is not censored because of what he has written, but they want to prevent other people from thinking. So what has happened now is that attention has shifted from sexuality to political dissent. Now, more censorship is on political dissent. And it's not only writers, it's journalists, cartoonists, column writers, everybody is coming under the orbit of censorship. So I think the things are much worse now than they were 50 years ago when I was arrested for my book.
And has it sort of affected how you think, how you work, how you write, so to say? Has it affected your thinking process?
No, not at all. In fact, when I was arrested, I was in the process of writing my next novel, which was a political novel. And I continued to write it, and it was published next year. So it did not frighten me or affect my writing or make me write differently. But there were other women writers who said that it had affected them. So basically, it had harmed the literary society. It had harmed people at large who were afraid to think. I was not afraid to think. In fact, I was made more unafraid. I decided, okay, if they can't understand anything, let me be more frank, more open, and let them have it. So that maybe something will penetrate their heads. It did not change my style of writing at all.
Can you tell our viewers about your latest book, Ve Naya Borate? And if there was any particular character or a particular woman whose story stood out for you among the collection?
This is a collection of all women from all walks of life. From women who come to work in our homes, domestic help, professional women from all walks of life, politicians, activists, philosophers, writers. So it starts with my great grandmother, who was a very unusual person. I mean, when my mother was pregnant for the first time, she prayed that the child should be a daughter. In those days, she prayed that the first child should be a daughter. So she was that unusual. And it went on like that. My mother was a very unusual person. She was not interested in children. She was only interested in books. And she read all the time. She didn't ask us to read, nor did she give us any books to read. But the very act of seeing her read and how immersed she was in reading. And she was fluent in 3 languages, Hindi, Urdu and English, because she got married at the age of 15. And we learned to learn words. Basically, if you do not respect words, and you do not know that one word can make a difference to the entire theme, then it better not be a writer. And we learned this from our mother. Our father was also he used to read to us Shakespeare's sonnets and stories from Urdu and Persian. So we were surrounded by books and readers. So I developed a respect first for readers, then for writers. See, for books and readers, because if there are no readers, then there are no books. There are no writers.
Absolutely.
So I felt that the real cognoscenti are the readers, not the critics. The critics should be ignored as far as possible. They should not be allowed to affect your work as long as the readers are reading. The day the readers stop reading you, then that's a bad day. About this new book of mine, which is not a novel. I don't call it a novel. I call it a memoir. But it's actually, each chapter tells a story. So, strictly speaking, इसको कहते हैं ना किस्सा दर किस्सा है. There are a number of kissas in it, and it could very well be called a novel. And if I had written it in English, I would have called it a novel. But in Hindi, what happens is that our critics are still very hidebound. So they would have talked about the structure of the novel, and this is not the structure of the novel, and this and that. So I thought instead of giving them ammunition for that, let me just call it a memoir. And it's not my story. It's not a autobiography. It's not a story of certain people. It is the story of my time. Whatever happened during this time of my 85 years of living, at least from 5 years onwards, I could write about the people who were around. And I read a lot. In fact, I read Brothers Karamazov at the age of 9. So books were always a part of my life. And I lost all awe of great writers because I read them at a very young age. For me, it's all right. Dostoevsky, okay. Jalil, okay. In fact, Jalil was a frequent visitor to our house. And I found that the more complicated, the more complex, the more intricate a story is, the easier it is to understand. Because then you get, what I'm saying is not a contradiction in terms, you get engrossed in it. Once you get engrossed in a story, it loses all its complications. It becomes simple. It's only as long as the story fails to engross you, fails to captivate you, that you find it difficult. When people say, no, we couldn't read that novel, there's something very wrong. That means that the novel was not written to be read. I have great faith in readers. And I feel that the reader knows how to choose books. And reader wants to read. It's only that either the books are too expensive or they're not easily available. We do not have enough libraries. I remember when I was a child, we used to have a neighborhood library. And people used to donate books there. And I remember taking out a book, the front page was not there, it was torn. So I didn't know what was the name of the book. I didn't know what was the name of the author. I read it, enjoyed it, was very disturbed by it, but I never knew what the book was. It was only when I came to Delhi and started writing, which was after I was 32, and all the Hindi writers were talking of Camus and Camus' Outsider.
Wow.
And then I took that book out of the library and I realized that that's the book I had read when I was 10 years old. And without the name of the book or the author, it had made an impression on me. That meant it was a good book.
Absolutely.
So basically, we should have more those kinds of efforts. In our school also, we had a class library, which I was running. And again, books were donated. Because after all, once you've read a book, how many times have you read it? So books were donated, and out of these donated books, we had a vast library. And from one class to another, girls used to go, and they developed this habit of reading. That is what I feel is very, very important. These days, people don't want to read; they just want to see and hear, and for short time. Total attention span is very, very short. When you read a book, first thing you need to learn, is to dare to be alone with yourself. Most people are very afraid to be alone. To be left alone by yourself means you will have to analyze yourself. You will have to think. And people are afraid of doing that. So I think give courage to people also. It is necessary that they should read.
What you said just sort of reminded me. I read somewhere recently that reading is the only active form of entertainment, so to say. All other kinds of entertainment, whether you're watching something, whether you're listening, it's all passive. You're just consuming it, just going inside. You don't have to put in any effort.
For example, you have an image. When you read a book, you have an image of the character. But let's take the most ordinary and the most known person. Say Ram or Krishna. You have an image of the person when you read a book. You read Valmiki or Tulsidas or anything. When you see that person on the screen, the whole thing is shattered. Because then the director has imposed his image on you. So you no longer, it totally shatters the whole thing. It makes the whole thing smaller, trivial, and linear. The most important thing is that the whole life, all experiences become linear. In a book, they are never linear. They always have a multi-dimensional view. That's why it's books.
So, Vishnu, what you said, I have a question in two parts. The first is I want to know more about what were some of the literary influences, because to imagine someone reading Dostoevsky and Counts at the age of 9 and 10 is just baffling to me, because I have tried to read them in my teens, and even then they were just mind-boggling, so to say. Just the
They are mind-boggling.
sheer depth in the. So to think that someone at that young age read that is.
You know, there is one thing, you're innocent at that time.
Uh-huh.
So you absorb it. Like Mirza and Come Outside. The first sentence is, Mother died
Yes.
yesterday or day before. I don't know.
I don't know.
Now, if you read it at this age, you feel very sad. The fellow doesn't know when his mother died. But at that age, I could understand. It is not that he is not feeling pain. It's the
Yes.
pain which is making him forget. So I could understand the basic thing about the person. Also, you know, he is convicted basically because he didn't show any grief at the time of his mother's death. It doesn't matter whether you feel grief. You should show it. Because he does not show, he is accused of being heartless and not feeling any grief. The point is that at that age, I could understand that he is feeling grief, particularly when he says that when he's in jail, he remembers what his mother had done or what his mother had said, which means that he cared for her deeply. So I think at that age, you are unspoiled. You have only your own experience to carry with you, to depend upon. And because we had an unusual mother and an unusual father and an unusual grandmother, so I could relate to these people. I could relate to these people. My mother would probably say the same kind of thing. I remember when I got married and I came home for the first time after my marriage. My father was all over me, all very emotional, hugging me, kissing me, this and that. Then he had come to the station, then he brought me home. And my mother says, Acha, you come. That's it. That's all. So I could understand that it was not lack of feeling. It was that she was shy of expressing it, or she did not find it necessary to express it, express the feelings. They weren't she. So that maybe it is my upbringing and my very weird family. Because, I mean, it has to be weird. We are three sisters who write. If a family produces three writers, something has to be wrong with that family.
So yeah, as my question was, what were some of the other that shaped your, so to say, overall perspective? What were some of your major literary influences while you were growing up, apart from these?
Well, you know, as I said, I read so many people that I can't say that I had any one person who had influenced me. But if you ask me, I mean, my favorite is Dostoevsky. And in Hindi, my favorite is Manoj Shyam Joshi, who's much later, of course. And I did not very strongly care for Rabindranath Tagore, but I liked other Bengali writers, Bandyopadhyay, Pathir Panchali. These books I really enjoyed, and I even enjoyed the popular books. Like I enjoyed Oscar Wilde. I was a great fan of Oscar Wilde. A great fan of P.G. Wodehouse also. In fact, if you want to learn how to write English, you should read P.G. Wodehouse. His language is immaculate. Absolutely. Particularly in translation, if you want to translate, you must first read
Which perhaps makes sense. A lot of Indian English writers have sort of grown up on a staple diet of Woodhouse.
Very few people read Woodhouse.
I have seen quite a few, I guess.
Some few people only read Woodhouse because the Britishers did. We did in our generation. We did, but no. Now gradually, maybe he's catching up again. Probably again, people are reading it.
So I have another question about how you have sort of grown up reading translated literature, right? You read Russian literature that was translated into English. You have read French literature that's been translated into English. How do you see a sort of changing? Because it's very rather obvious to see that the world of translation is slowly changing in Indian literature, which has been required for a very long time. So how do you see this industry? How do you see it affecting your body of work in Hindi? And how do you see it encouraging regional literature more?
You see, I don't think anything encourages literature. It is just written. But a lot of works of regional languages are translated in Hindi. But not so many works of Hindi are translated in regional languages. So we are very familiar with regional literature. They are not familiar with Hindi literature.
Like even I think Surendra Mohan Pathak's a lot of even pulp fiction is being translated.
And like Sharat Chandra, people don't know he's a Bengali writer. The Kannadigas think he's a Kannada writer. Tamilians think he's a Tamil writer. And we read him, so we always thought he was a Hindi writer. But what has happened is, what is a little frightening is that very mediocre translations are coming in. Particularly this race for getting translated into English. And most English translations are bad. Most English translations, particularly from Hindi, are bad. So a bad translation kills the original also. So there is a danger also in translation. But at the same time, you don't get known to accepting to your own language growth unless you are translated. But I've suffered from it. I mean, I have to ask HarperCollins to reskin my book, withdraw it from circulation, remainder the book, as they say, because it was so badly translated. So basically, translation is a like two-edged sword. It has to be good. And it's not always that something is lost in translation. There are gains in translation also. I translated my own story from Hindi to English, and while I was translating it, I felt, I should have said it like this. So I said it like that in English, and then I went back and changed it in Hindi also. Because sometimes, when you're redoing it in another language, the nuances hit you, and you can do a better job of it. But basically, it is translation is not a profession. It is just like writing literature. You have to forego your ego. Your ego has to be made subservient to the ego of the writer, and then you have to translate.
Like I remember reading somewhere that translation is less like a transformation and more like a regeneration or a different writing, creating a different new thing altogether, because you have to create the nuances of the original language into the new one and sort of create a new cultural context, so to say.
That is true, but you cannot change the original.
Absolutely.
You see, there is a big, there are limitations. That's why I said that you have to subject your ego, make it subservient to the ego of the writer, and at the same time, you have to be creative. So it's a very difficult job. It's not an easy job. It's not like everybody can just translate. I find here now everybody's book has been translated in English and Hindi. I find it very difficult to believe that.
Like books are being translated immediately after publication.
I was also told that why don't you get it translated in English? I said, thank you very much. Unless there is a good translator, I would rather not be translated. I remember saying it at a conference that we have survived without being read for 2,000 years. So we can survive a few more years. But I'd rather not be badly translated.
So you also write in multiple languages, and
I write in two languages, English and Hindi.
Which is multiple for me because a lot of people just write in one. And how does that basically sort of affect your creative process, do you think?
You see, we are bilingual by quirk of history. We didn't choose to be bilingual. We were forced to be bilingual
By the
by
government?
history, by
Yes.
let's say a joke that history committed upon us. But having said that, I feel equally comfortable in both languages. But when I'm writing in Hindi, I can play with the language much more than when I'm writing in English. I've only recently learned to play with English, that you can break it and remake it, and you can use your own words, and to hell with the grammar, and to hell with the critic. Because these English teachers ruin it for you by teaching you correct English. So once you give up that, just like in Hindi, I don't care whether there is a word like this or not. If there is no word like that, I say, well, it should be. If somebody said there is no word like Mazaya, I said, then it should be. It should be a word. So it's like that, you also coin words. One of the things that a writer does is to add to the vocabulary. So once you take that attitude, things are okay.
So to wrap it up, because I think it's been a while, sorry for that. I'll just like to know what are you reading and if you're working on something right now.
No, thankfully I'm not working on anything because I've just written this massive book which took me 6 years. But I do write political commentary for Wire and other things. So that I can't help. So I write, I've always been anti-establishment, whoever was in the establishment. So I write that. And there is a very great pressure on me to write a book on Delhi. Because they feel that once I die, all those things will die with me. Because I have lived in Delhi from very early childhood.
The city change.
All the changes, all the great people who were there, who are no longer there, and all the small little things, which made the Delhi culture what it was. So maybe I'll write a book on Delhi, and this time in English.
And are you reading something right now?
I'm always reading.
Yeah, that's
I'm
like an
always
implied
reading.
that's a presumed thing.
I just finished reading this a very, very beautiful book called The Black Hill by Mamang Dai.
Yes, I have. She's a not
Arunachal.
Yes, sorry, Arunachal.
And this is the history of Arunachal, but it reads just like as if it has happened to her. This is some 5 centuries ago, but when you read it, you feel that this is something that has happened to the writer. Very beautiful. Just finished it.
Have you started something else?
I mean, immediately I cannot recall the names.
Sorry.
This stayed with me. And in Hindi, I read the Keeda Jadi, which really stayed with me. This is about this. There is a Jadi booty which grows in Uttarakhand,
Wow.
heights of Uttarakhand, which is supposed to increase virility.
Okay.
So it's very costly and very difficult to cultivate. And you get only one jadi out of a lot of crop. So how they do it, and it is such a rigorous kind of a environment in which they work. Very beautiful work.
Thank you so much for the interview.